Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another stream. It's going to be a really exciting time tonight because, as always, we're in for some changes when it comes to TFT on Wednesdays. Now, it's no exception tonight just because there's been a B patch. And you might say, oh, well, B patches aren't that big a deal, you know, they shouldn't be changing up too much. But you'd really be surprised because the B patch that we've got tonight has a couple of really interesting changes. Specifically, they nerfed Cavalier at Cavalier 4, buffed it at Cavalier 2, however, but they nerfed it at Cavalier 4, which was becoming the premier frontline as it was an 80% damage reduction because it's normally 40% and doubled when they move and cast spells, which was very often. Now it's gone to 35%, so 10% more damage taken. Definitely nothing to scoff at, considering that I believe this is approximately where they were at before the before the buffs that came through on 11.11. As well, they've nerfed Kennen with some health and mana nerfs. Sett, they specifically nerfed his mana slightly. His armor shred at 3 stars by 10. Not that I think that does the biggest thing for him, but also his hitbox for his ability used to hit champions that were just outside the edge of the cone. Now it doesn't, so that may actually end up reducing his range by 1 to 2 hexes, which could end up making a large difference. We'll have to see. However, I still think Sett will be fine if you get it early, not necessarily the force that it was previously. And I also think that Cavaliers will still be fine as a frontline with Spellweavers, specifically a reroll Brand and Victor, but we'll have to see, for sure. As well, Varus received a nerf to his AD and attack speed, so I do think that Varus reroll is not the way to go. However, I still think there's value in potentially using Varus as a Kale item holder. Not that Kale's been particularly powerful ever since they lowered her health base to 500. As well, Lulu, the sleeper OP of the set. OP overpowered, of course. They nerfed her starting mana by 10, and they also dropped her polymorph duration by 1 second at each rank. That's going to be a big difference for her, as now it's going to start off at a 1.5 seconds instead of 2.5 seconds, and that's huge. So just before we get into the games tonight, we always got to do a bit of a change up, get these little legend swaps going, because otherwise, how are you going to tell it's me if I don't have the unique little legend of the evening? We did also work at the end of the previous stream for TFT to get the booms that will have the different fireworks. So I think what I want to do for today is I'll run a firework. We'll have some fun with it for sure. Fireworks on the beach? Why not? And with that, let's jump right in. as we just jump right into the game here, I'm not sure what will end up being good, so for now we'll just take a nice defensive item with a defensive unit start to guarantee that we should be able to get through these minions here and hope that we can find some units to help us in our early game. The only Hellion that I ended up seeing nerfed was Cannon, so I do think Hellions are still strong enough to run in the set. The other option I had was to go for the 2 Callistas, as that could have very well turned into an Abomination game for us. So for now what I'll do is I'll just look into getting our defensive items out on Leona, knowing that she'll be useful as the game goes on for a frontline tank, regardless of what we end up running. Because she should just be a strong frontline option. So really unfortunate there that we don't end up finding another Hellion, just to get our 3 Hellions going, but we do end up getting a Thresh for free to let us get an extra knight in and a decent unit at that. I do think, however, that having Varus in as a potential backline damage with our Leona being so tanky should be better than the Poppy. We'll have to see, of course, but that was just my initial guess. It's looking like that paid off as we're able to get our first win of the night going. As far as compositions that we're hoping to run, we'd love to go Hellions here. I'm not sure that we'll end up hitting it, but we'll have to see. So the reason why I grabbed the Shadow Rod there was to make the more evil Nomicon for Cannon. I'm not sure if it'll end up being strong enough, and as such I may end up grabbing both the Sett and the Udyr here, because it only seems like there's one person going for Sett and not necessarily even in contest right now. So I'll end up grabbing both Sett and Udyr, because if we do find a Draconic, it's not too late to be able to still go for Sett. If we did want to be more selective at this point, what we would do is we would end up selling both of these, as well as selling Varus, Leona, and potentially Thresh to get 10 gold. So unfortunately, since we're not seeing enough Hellions, I did opt to take them out, as I believe selling them here would be the right play. Just considering we really haven't been hitting any Hellions. Or nearly enough Hellions to feel confident to play them. So going into Carousel, the next item we're going to be looking for here is a sword, as we know we'll want to start powering up Sett. Now that we have this sword, we can at least look for a Bloodthirster, and that'll be a decent item to start our Sett off, knowing that he will take a little bit more before getting a huge amounts of healing. The other bonus that we got from that is that that item ended up being on an Ashe, so we do just get Draconic right away. Which is great for us for our timing, even though we may potentially take some losses here. We're still okay with it. As we'll start to get our Draconic going without too much of a delay. Also, I believe thanks to the B patch nerf, I don't think the composition will be completely contested. Yeah, it's looking like at the moment will be completely uncontested, so we're feeling pretty good about our odds here. As well, from here, we're just going to start saving up our economy, see if we can get to 50 gold, potentially end up find a pair, or a third for this Warwick pair, a third for this Sett pair, and at least find a Gragas for our 4 Brawler frontline. That'll make Sett a lot more durable. If we do end up finding a Zyra, I may swap it out over this Ashe temporarily just to get the sword off of her and onto Sett. Although, without Sett being at least 2 stars, I don't think it will really do enough. However, it's looking like we're going to come out with a win here, and that's going to break our loss streak as we head into Krugs, which we're never really bothered by, as we just want to start amassing gold, and that may end up putting us above 30. With any gold that we may find from these Krugs. Getting the free 2-star Sett there is really nice as well, because that will give us a bunch of survivability as we keep going. From here, we may look to aggressively go towards level 6, or we could just look to slow level. But once we find the 4 Brawlers, I do think getting them in will be very important, as that extra 600 health per unit will make a big difference for us here. So we get lucky and find another Ashe, which lets us swap out the Ashe we have. We don't need the Udyr, nor do we really want the Zyra, as eventually we'd want to replace this Udyr with something like a Heimerdinger. I don't think I need the extra health here, so what I'll do is I'll just make a Sunfire, as it could give us potential wins, which can let me buy the Udyr. Looking like, unfortunately, this will barely be a loss here just because we don't have a second item on Sett. But overall, we're not too disappointed with how that round turned out. We're happy we get the crit glove there, as that Infinity Edge should really help Sett pump out some good damage. The only thing we'd want to still get is some form of healing for him. Ideally a Bloodthirster. If we're not able to find that, then we would also settle for something like a Hand of Justice, potentially, as we just need to start getting our healing on for Sett here. Seeing as this round will probably be a loss, definitely, I'm going to end up selling the extra Udyr and Ashe actually just to make 50 gold. From here we want to look to get ready to level to 6, as we can still find Gragas at level 6 with decent odds, but we definitely don't want to waste time because that's where we're going to be slow rolling to look for our Sett 3-star before we start leveling up towards 7 or 8. And eventually 9. So here there's no sword, and there's only a shadow magic resist that would combine for us. So with the bow taken, we're just going to look to take the Ashe with a crit glove here. That will make a shadow jeweled gauntlet on her. Not ideal, but not the worst thing in the world, considering we'll just get a 2-star Ashe going. Perfect, so we do end up finding the Gragas, which we're always happy to see. And that's going to end up giving us our 4 brawler frontline for now. What will end up probably happening is we'll end up selling the spare Udyr if we lose. But with the 4 brawlers, we should have a bit more durable frontline and could potentially find our way through. So, very surprising that we've already ended up finding ourselves a second 2-star Ashe here. We could potentially look to take the Shadow Jeweled Gauntlet off her, but we do want to get her 3 stars with our Draconic, so we don't mind just having 6 Ashes at 3/6. So for now, we don't really mind taking these losses, but we do know over time that we're going to have to start getting some wins here, and those will end up happening as we get 3 stars, but until then, we're probably going to end up losing, and we end up taking the best loss we can here, only taking a single damage because that unit came through the Hellion portal and extending our loss streak. I'm not too sure what we'll end up using the spatula on. It could be for Dawnbringer, it could be potentially for Renewer if we're able to get towards level 8 and then 9. We'll have to see. But seeing as we are getting much closer to our 3-starred Sett and Ashe, we may just start looking to level with our spare gold here, as we don't want to fall too far behind the curve in terms of our opponent's power. Now in this armory, we don't end up finding a magic resist, which is unfortunate, but we do find a shadow crit glove. And what that's gonna do is, I'm just trying to look for another Udyr for another 2-star, is I can actually just make a Hand of Vengeance, and that'll be good enough on our Sett. So from here on our on the item carousel, we're very likely to be one of the last picks. So I'm not too worried about what we're gonna have for selection. I just know that whatever we end up with should be an item to help our Ashe, as she'll look to be our carry. So we'll hope for something like a sword if we can. A bit unfortunate we take the loss there, not unexpected as we are on a 7-loss streak, but alright, now that we're able to hit the Sett 3-star, we should be able to start winning a couple of these fights. And what we can do beyond this is start leveling towards 7 and eventually 8 and 9. With our extra Draconic income, as long as we can stabilize and stay alive. The next thing we'll want to add in at level 7 is another Ranger for our Ashe, as that attack speed bonus will be very, very useful. Yep, and thanks to the 3-star Sett, we're able to break our loss streak there, which we're really happy about as we were starting to lose a bit too much health. So what I'll actually do here is I'll take the Kindred, because with the health that could make a Zeke's, which would just help Kindred and Ashe. As well, we would want to have Kindred in anyway as our ideal Ranger. So it just seems like the perfect unit to grab to throw in for our level 7. I think what I would end up doing if I had the Zeke's would be to put Wolf next to Lamb, like this. And I might do that for now anyway, knowing that I can just bring Gragas back down to do a little bit of assassin blocking. It is kind of unfortunate that no matter what, I won't be able to hit 50 gold here, even on the win, without selling the Gragas. And since we only have 1-star Gragas, I'm not sure if we actually want to sell him yet. I don't think we do. So from here, all we're gonna really look to do is look towards our level 8 and then eventually 9, as we do also have our 3-star Ashe, which should really help us with winning more of these fights. I guess I would say winning them more consistently is probably the best way to put it. And then whenever we find Heimerdinger, of course, we want to swap out our sad Udyr in the front line. But eventually, we would want to grab Darius at level 8 for the real armor shred that will let Sett deal as much damage as he can. But unfortunately, our opponent's Legionnaire composition with the 3-star Riven is just too much for us to handle right now. All we're really hoping for here is a sword. Beyond that, we'd be happy with, I guess, anything, and we end up getting the crit glove to at least make the trap claw on Kindred. As we're mainly just looking to stay alive here, we want to find a unit to put in that can help us, and with that, we end up finding Ryze, who will be another Mystic for our composition. As you can see, without the consistent healing of the Bloodthirster, our Sett's definitely not dealing as much damage as we would hope. Or sorry, as staying alive as long as we would hope, and therefore not dealing quite the damage we would hope, but we're still happy enough with his performance. And since we're able to get above 40 gold here, we're rapidly making our way towards level 9, where we'll look to find more Kindreds, Heimerdinger to replace Zyra, and Darius and Volibear to include into the composition. Volibear replacing Warwick, and Darius would be replacing Ryze. Level 9 would also include Ivern, just to add ourselves the Renewer that we would have with Heimerdinger, as well as Revenant with Volibear to give us a very durable frontline. But of course we'll have to see what ends up happening, because it's very possible we could end up in a 5th or 6th place finish without having that Bloodthirster on Sett. Unfortunately, considering our position on health, we're going to have to roll everything down here and just hope for the best. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find ourselves the Volibear that we would have loved to replace our front line, but we did find Heimerdinger and Darius, which Heimerdinger kind of just got deleted from the corner, but thankfully reversing the opponent that I would say is weakest against us, and lets us get through to Carousel, where we could find a full item to help any of Ashe, Kindred, or Heimerdinger. No matter how much I'd love to grab that Teemo with the Revenant Spatula, I do think the Volibear is our best pickup here, as it has an item that can work well with Volibear and gives us our brawler frontline that will have much more impact than Warwick at this stage of the game. That round win also puts us in 5th place, giving us a decent level of confidence here. I'm not sure if Darius is level 9 inclusion or if I should include Ivern. I really do believe that Ivern is a strong pick here, just because it'll give us Revenant, so Volibear will be able to come back. But I do want to keep the Darius on the bench, because we want to look to go to level 9 as soon as we can from here, since we have actually found our units and don't have as good odds of finding 2 stars. So I would say we're as stable as we're going to get. Unfortunately, the crowd control from our opponent's Riven and Warwick was just too much for us. So we may still end up in a 5th place finish, but at least it wasn't guaranteed 5th from there. I do think that we have to do some rolling here, knowing that if we don't find any other upgrades, we may just be dead. And unfortunately, it's looking like that may be the case. What I can do, however, is I can look to put the Trap Claw on Ashe, hoping that she's able to survive a little bit longer. And we'll have to see if it ends up making the difference, as we're against the Riven player that decidedly destroyed us last time. I don't think we quite have enough crowd control for her, so it looks like we're going to end up in a 5th place finish here. Not terrible for the first game of the night, but you can definitely see what happens if Sett doesn't have those perfect items for himself. So with that 5th place finish, we're not too concerned. We're still ready to keep going into the night, but we do need to be a bit more open, knowing that the composition's not as strong as it was even just yesterday. With that, I think we're good to jump right back into things. Just as we load into game here, I do want it to be known that I'm not looking to aggressively climb. I'm not looking to break the meta. I'm just looking to have a bit of fun. Look to see what's changed and see if we can figure out what would be our best options in each game. as we get into the game here, we're really hopeful we hit some Hellions, as that could be a fantastic use of our items and off of our start, because we're halfway towards both the Jeweled Gauntlet and the Static Shiv, or ideally Static Stiletto. I don't think it would be right to pass up on a free 2-star as we have, so I'll just take the Trundle for now. As you can see, without any synergies or looking to go to level 4, we're definitely going to fall behind in this game. However, we now find ourselves in a more, I'd say, advantageous position, knowing that we have the option of 3 Hellions right in front of us, even though they're only 1-starred for now. So here it's really unfortunate that we end up taking a full unit's loss, as we're going to be draining health pretty quickly if we don't start picking up the pace for ourselves here. Without getting either item component, we're feeling kind of weak by comparison to other units, or sorry, other compositions that we're facing. So what we need to do definitely what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to get at least a regular ability power, a regular bow, or a shadow bow off the carousel. And we hope that those items will be there. Seeing as we're taking such hard losses, we're not really going to have time to even play out our game plan if we don't start finding ourselves items or item components to help us here. So there is a shadow bow on the carousel, and I do think that's more important than getting the ability power, so I'll look to go for that first. Now that we have the shadow bow, we can make the static stiletto on the Ziggs, which should make us a fair bit stronger here. And as always, I'll make a recommendation that if you are going to make an item from Carousel, you're going to want to make it on the unit you just grabbed, because if your current unit is holding another component, you may end up with the wrong item and you'll definitely regret that later. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to buy the Zyra and throw her in for 2 Spellweavers. I know it's not necessarily the strongest play here, but we definitely want to reduce the amount of damage we're taking if we can help it, even if we do end up with losses. Definitely our next step is we're going to look to take out Trundle, but we'll keep him in for now just because he's a 2-starred 2-cost. But you can see from the damage charts just how much damage our Ziggs has done with those consistent stiletto chips and lowering the magic resistance of our opponents. Now that we've got this Leona, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put in Leona over Trundle to give us 2 knights as well as a 2-star frontliner that is meant to be a tank as opposed to a mix of tank and drain tank. So tank plus draining. Let's see. And what I'm going to do is sell this Trundle to get to 20 gold. Start getting us as close to 50 gold as soon as we can, knowing that competition's only going to get stiffer as the rounds continue. As you can see, the addition of the Spellweavers has really helped us in being able to pick up the damage that we're putting out, as well as the static stiletto is really helping lower the magic resistance and giving us those much needed wins after our early start. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to buy this brand. The reason why is because depending on the gold that we get, we could potentially just look to include brand here and maybe even get him 2 stars. Even though the magic resist shred will be the same as the static shiv, with having additional units out, it's quite possible the shiv won't hit everybody. So now that we found Lulu, we have a very powerful option of being able to put in 5 Hellion if we're able to find another one. Now that's a bit of an if, knowing that we're missing Kennen, a 2-cost, but we're happy enough to do a roll here, knowing that we have enough options of what to hit, including Brand, Kled, Kennen, potentially even a Lulu, potentially even a Poppy. So there were enough options there that I felt pretty good about rolling. As it stands now, however, I am going to put Zyra in, as I think she'll do better in terms of the overall power and durability of our team. Unfortunately, this Coven Assassin player has most of the components they already really need. So because of that, we're definitely going to take a loss there. But we're not too discouraged, knowing that we should end up pretty well if we can find our items here. Unfortunately, we didn't find any ability power, which is a bit difficult for us here. What we can look to do is take the recurve bow, because that could potentially turn into a useful item later. Considering we're uncontested, I am really, really surprised to not have seen a single cannon there, knowing that there's a 40% chance to find those 2 costs. Yeah, and without getting that 5th Hellion in, it's very, very likely that we'll be taking a loss here. But the big reason why I wanted to get Kennen was because then I would be able to start putting more item components on him. Alright. So we do find some good pickups in Poppy and Lulu. Unfortunately, we don't find the Kennen to be able to replace our Leona. So we'll just have to hope that we can find him as we level, because we do not have the ability to afford rolling here any more than we have to try to stabilize. Yeah, seeing the nerfs to both Kennen and Lulu, the composition's definitely weaker, but I do think that it was the strongest composition bar none. Actually, that's not true. The strongest composition except for Sett as a primary carry with Draconic, because you just had a super increased amount of income there. We definitely want to grab the ability power if we can. So that's what we're going to do. And that should give us our Jeweled Gauntlet on Ziggs, which will really help in pumping up damage and eventually help us out with Teemo a lot. The other option we could do is we could put that on for a Morellonomicon for Kennen. But I'm more so concerned in just getting a Kennen in the first place, and I'd rather the initial power spike. As I say that, we find the Kennen, we're able to put him in for 5 Hellion, and I'm really unsure between what's more powerful of Morellonomicon or a Jeweled Gauntlet. I am inclined to say that the Jeweled Gauntlet will be stronger just because Ziggs will be buying more time on the back line here. So we'll have to see, because without Guardian Angel, Kennen is not going to be the best for us for frontline, but the attack speed increase is immediately noticeable and will do a lot of work for us here. And we're able to come out with a win and start working up our economy again. Something that we're really going to need, as we'll look to get to level 8 as soon as we can, with as much health as we can save, knowing that we're going to be looking to grab at least one Teemo. Ideally 3, but of course we can't really hope for that. The main reason why I want to keep these Ziggs, even though you might be saying, hey, you can sell the Ziggs, you can get to 20 gold, start working on those breakpoints like you were saying. I could, but if I end up getting to level 7 or 8 and I can't afford a Teemo, potentially having a 3-star Ziggs is good enough until we can find Teemo. As you can see, the extra attack speed is just making the difference here. And once again, we're barely able to come out with a win there. But we do find ourselves with a 2-star cannon and one closer to that 3-star Ziggs that could be our redemption as we continue on with this game. Now at level 7, what I would most like to include would be a Mystic. If not that, then potentially something like our Rel, but we do want to try to save up as much gold as we can here. What I'll do for now is I'll put the blue buff on this Ziggs, because at worst, it turns him into a machine gun. At best, it gives us an option to be able to win more fights with our damage. Now I know there's a Zyra in the shop, but I would much rather have a Mystic and a Cavalier than the Zyra as a Spellweaver. As I say it out loud actually, and knowing that we may not be able to end up with Teemo, I do think getting that Zyra is going to be more valuable. So I'll look to snag it here. Unfortunately, we don't find the armor or the ability power that we were looking for, but we do end up finding a shadow belt, which means that we can end up using this belt for a ZZ Rot, and then we can still have the shadow belt to potentially make ourselves more evil Nomicon, which will work just as well on our cannon. Once we get above 50 gold, we're going to be putting all of our extra gold into leveling to try to get towards level 7 and then level 8 as quickly as we can. In the hopes that we can preserve our life total long enough to afford a Teemo. As you can see, the blue buff has made a huge difference in our survivability, and we're coming out with wins on these fights that personally, I wasn't even expecting. Now, win or lose going into Carousel here, we really want to find at least a, probably I would say an ability power, if not an armor. Considering we may end up as high as a 4th pick, depending on what happens with this round, we have to be ready that we may not end up getting ability power, and if we can't get ability power, we'll look for armor. If we also can't get armor, I'm not exactly sure what we'll end up going for. We'll have to see. As we come away with the win there, we're very hesitant to see what'll happen with this TGL Gatsby player. Seeing as the targeting for our opponents hasn't been the best, I'm surprised they're able to come out with the win, but it does mean we're going to get our 2nd pick on the carousel. So there is ability power and armor. We'll look to go for the ability power, and if not, then we'll definitely be taking the armor. Because I do think that getting the more evil Nomicon applied and the magic resist, or sorry, the healing reduction out across as much of the team as we can will be extremely vital in getting some of these wins. as the biggest thing stopping us from closing out these rounds has been the healing of our opponents. What I'll also look to do is I'll just throw the BF sword. I'll throw the Shadow BF sword onto Kennen. And then for now I'll put Hecarim in as a Cavalier. Actually, what I think I would rather do is throw in Taric as another Knight, knowing that he is a defensive frontline unit that can also provide a large amount of armor and healing, in the very unlikely event that he lives long enough for that to happen. So we're not overly deterred here, as we still hit our 50 gold breakpoint, and we'll start looking towards an aggressive level, towards level 8. And once we get to level 8, which we will be going for stage 5-1, we'll roll down the remainder of our gold looking for things like Kindred, Ivern, Volibear, and Teemo. Unfortunately, getting the spatula this late means that we could look for a Legionnaire or a Skirmisher, but we're not looking to really run either of those, so we may end up just making the Giant Slayer. But we were really hoping for an armor for Kennen. Unfortunately, without that and without finding any 5 costs on our roll down at all, we're in a pretty rough spot here. Thankfully, we do end up finding the Kindred, who is the 5-cost Mystic we were looking for, but without having Volibear here instead of Zyra, our front line's feeling pretty weak. The main reason why I'm continuing to roll here is just because we could find a Teemo even at 0 gold and be able to afford it, knowing that we still have enough health. As long as we have 6 health, we can still buy him. But it's getting really dangerous for us in this point to be able to still buy Teemo. Unfortunately, our opponent's invokers were just too much for our composition to handle without at least having a bit more damage or survivability, so it's possible we may end up with another 5th place finish on the night. I'm going to end up grabbing the Dragon's Claw here just because I noticed that a lot of the main compositions on the night deal a decent amount of magic damage. If I wouldn't have gone with that, I think I would have gone for the Chalice of Malice on Vel'Koz to buff up Ziggs that will ideally turn into a Teemo. Now we would want this to go on Volibear, but since we're drastically running out of health, I'm just going to end up making our items here and seeing what ends up happening for us. As depending on how hard of a loss we take here, we may not even be able to afford Teemo, even if we do find him. Yeah, that's exactly what I was worried about. See, we're at exactly 6 health, so no matter how much we'd love to, since we were not able to grab him on the carousel, and the person who did is now, I believe, out. We're at the point that even if we found Teemo, we wouldn't be able to afford him, unfortunately, so we're just looking pretty dead in the water, all things considered. And it's looking like it'll end up in a 5th or 6th place finish for the second game of the evening. So what I opted to do there was something a little bit more drastic. I opted to completely ditch the idea of Ivern and Volibear, since we don't really have the gold to afford it right now, and we're just playing to survive. And what I opted for instead was just to throw in the 3rd Mystic to give us that extra 60 magic resistance in the hopes that it will buy us enough time. Unfortunately, however, we're versing a Kayle player who was able to get to Ascension, so it's very likely that we'll be out in 5th place. I was going to say 6th place, but then I saw the other opponent was already removed, so I mean, all things considered, we'll take a 5th. With that, I'm going to take a quick break just before we get into our 3rd and final game of the evening. Be right back. Welcome back, welcome back. I hope you've all had a time to get a stretch, get a snack or a drink, and that you're ready for our last game of the evening, because I know I am. As we look to get things started here, I'm definitely taking to heart that I need to play a bit more flexibly, knowing that the developers never really want forcible compositions to be strong in the meta, and they made the B patch specifically because level 6 and 2 cost carries were just too strong. With that being said, I'll try to keep options open for some physical damage carries like Draven or Riven. We'll just have to see what we end up finding. I'm not too sure which way I'd want to take this game. All that I know is I really don't like the health that's just sitting on this Callista. Seeing the items we have some really defensive items, which makes me think that we'll have a pretty powerful front line. If we're able to get any sort of bows, I could definitely see us playing something like an Aphelios carry, is my gut reaction. But we'll have to see. I'm fairly confident that in overtime we'll end up losing this. Oh, well thankfully Gragas didn't get his cast off, so we were okay. I'm not totally sure what's going on in this game. I'm really not. All I know is I'm looking at my items and I see 2 perfect cannon items. Plus we have 3 Hellions with a 2-star Poppy. The other option that I see is we could look to go something with Sett. Since we do have a sword and the ability to get a defensive item with the Sunfire Cape for some potential early wins. We'll have to see what ends up happening here. So all we're really missing now is another Draconic unit, and I'd be totally fine to just jump into Sett here. So we don't end up hitting the Draconic unit, but we do end up finding another Gragas, always useful for us, and pairs for both of our other Hellions that we have out on the board. The big reason why I rolled there is because if we would have found Udyr, I think it would have been really, really important to include him now. As it would have started us on our Draconic path as soon as possible. Seeing as we're still sitting at 100 health, I doubt we're going to be able to get what we would want here, which would be Crit Glove, Magic Resist, or Sword. So we'll just have to wait and see what we can get. Once again, we'll still have to see which way we want to take this game, because right now we have the 2-star Sett, we have 2 other brawlers, we also have some Hellions, and we have some pretty good items for them. Realistically speaking, I don't think we have enough to be able to go Hellions, and since we do have the brawlers, we're feeling pretty good, but we don't have our last Draconic unit. So without that, I don't know if it's going to be good enough. But we can't afford to deliberate for any longer, or else we're going to fall too far behind for economy, since we've done a couple of early rolls that, realistically speaking, we shouldn't have done while we were still deciding on our composition. So with that, we'll have to see what we can find, because if we don't find ourselves Udyr or Ashe, we're not necessarily up a creek, as we could pivot to Riven with Abomination. But I know that's definitely not going to be as strong as going for Sett. So I'm really not sure if it'll work, but seeing that we're not getting Draconic, I do think that my current best plan is just to go for Draven. And from here, all we really need to do is level. I know we don't want to keep the 4 brawlers in. Like, I definitely am aware of that. But what we do want for now is to try to get our 2 Legionnaire, and then eventually we'll work on our 3 Forgotten, and then start looking to transition to a much stronger board involving 3 and 4 costs. But that'll have to be closer to level 7 or level 8. For now, the 4 brawlers should be doing a decent job, knowing that Draven should be getting a good amount of healing in from the Bloodthirster that we have on him. What we're really hopeful for on Carousel here would be either of a bow to make a Ginsu's, or a crit glove for Infinity Edge. Ideally, we'd like to have either of them as shadow items, but we'll take whatever we can get here. I'm not sure if it'll be stronger, but I have a feeling that it will. So what I'll do is I'll end up dropping down to 2 brawlers here, just so I can get our 2 knights. I can also try to get our Forgotten in to help Draven. I think something like this is how I'll do our positioning for now. I don't believe we're going to take this round, but I was really hopeful that we would, as that would get us to our 20 gold breakpoint. But especially between our positioning and just the sheer power of our opponent's board, we definitely take the loss here. So going into Carousel here, we would want to grab ourselves the Shadow Bow if we can. If we can't, we'll take the Mordekaiser with the armor, and if we can't get that, then we would take the Shadow Spatula, because we could make a Forgotten Spatula for one of our other units. I really don't think we'll be able to win this round. Not for a second do I think that. But I did want to see if we could make a breakpoint for 30 gold here. Unfortunately, the Abomination is going to come running in and just delete our Draven. As it's just fully itemized for damage here. From here, we're going to just look to level towards 7 as we look to get our gold up. If we found a 2-star Draven, we'd feel much, much more confident about the state of our game. I want to try to put Forgotten back in because I think that it will try to help give Draven that little bit kick in terms of his damage that he might need to break through the opposing front line. Unfortunately, our units are pretty tightly grouped here, so Varus should be able to just tear them apart. And between the armor that Tarek's providing and Leona's natural defenses, I'm not sure that we'll have the damage here. Although, seeing just the sheer number of axes flying through the air gives me a little bit of confidence that we're on the right path. Perfect. Finding the 2-star Draven really helps us feel more confident here. That we can just save our money and then look to start leveling afterwards. I mean, on 4-2, what we'd love to see is a crit glove or a shadow crit glove, as either one would be really valuable for us here. Whenever we get Mordekaiser, I know I'd want to swap him in over Riven. In the meantime, we're just really glad we grabbed that 2-star Draven, as it lets him clean up the opponents here. Perfect. So we do end up with a Shadow Crit Glove. I was hoping to get 2 Shadow items on Draven, as that really beefs up his damage. Giving him... It may only be the extra 6 attack damage, but you've seen what buffs of 5 AD can do to a champion. And I really think that he'll be strong enough now to get us through to the next stages of the game that we need. I'm not buying the Thresh in the shop, because if we win, we'll get to 50 gold. But in the event we don't win, I'll just buy the Thresh. From here, we're going to look to get to level 7 as fast as we can, and then start looking to get to level 8. Potentially adding in something like a Diana and Mordekaiser for 2 Dragon Slayer and a better Legionnaire. And when I say better, I mean a Legionnaire that's more suited to frontline. Unfortunately, I think the Lulu may have spelled disaster for us, but thankfully, Draven, as crazy as he is able to come out on top as our solo carry. what we'll do for now is we'll make sure to put in Rel instead of Jax, just because we already have Cavalier, so it should make us a fair bit stronger. I also will put Jax in for 3 Ironclad just because we'll stay above 30 gold, and it will let us start working towards level 8 and give us those much increased chances of finding the 4 cost that we'll need. Going into Carousel here, we'd love to get health for a Warmogs for Mordekaiser, either regular or Shadow, although regular is preferred in this situation because we're not going to be looking to give Mordekaiser any sort of healing. I believe Thresh ended up just doing us a favor there, as it kept our Draven safe. The reason why I'm keeping Lux on the bench is so we can have 2 Mystic when we end up swapping out one of our Forgotten units with Rise. But we'll have to see what we can find here. As I'd said before, the perfect item we're looking for is health. It's pretty likely we'll get it because I know health isn't really a hot commodity in terms of carousel items. In the event the health does get taken though, we'll be looking for something like the armor. So we'll end up taking the shadow armor for ourselves. So this way we can make Mordekaiser into a much larger tank and much more of a threat for our front line. As well as still giving our composition some durability with 3 Ironclad. I do think the Titan's Revenge is going to be a decent option, but we'll have to see, as I know there are multiple assassin players, and if it weren't for our exact item layout, I don't think Draven would have survived that. But thankfully, with the 2-star Draven and our team slowly coming together, we're feeling a lot better as we look towards the late game here. Next round, we'll be able to get over 50 gold, and we'll just start looking to slowly acquire the pieces of our composition, as well as level towards level 8. Which will force at 5-1, and we may not make a full transition right away, knowing that we'll be still decently strong with our current position, since we do have 3 Ironclad as well as 2 Knights to give us a fair amount of durability for at least physical damage. From the Raptors, we hope to get a health. If we don't end up getting the belt, no problem, but our Mordekaiser will be much less durable for it. Seeing as we already have 14 item components, I think it's extremely unlikely that we'll end up getting any more item components. I believe we'll just end up getting gold, but who knows? I'd be happy to be proven wrong here. Unfortunately there we take our first loss in a while, and what we're going to end up doing is start slowly switching out our composition as we find more units that we need. We don't necessarily need the jacks. But for now, he should serve fine as an ironclad unit to buff up our composition. Ideally, what we want to do is swap Rel out with Lux, swap Hecarim out with Rise, Thresh with Viego, Nautilus with Taric, so we have a lot of changes we want to make, which is why I'm saying those aren't going to happen all at once. So I do think we're fine for now to just keep doing what we're doing. And unfortunately, Draven's targeting ended up hitting the opponent the furthest away from us. So we do end up taking yet another loss here. Wow. I am very surprised at the state of our game right now. We're not finding much of anything. With that being said, I do want to collapse our front line somewhat. As I know with the Cavalier buff, Rel will just jump forward. Going into Carousel, we have full items for a lot of our different units, so all we really want to do is find something that can better our composition. If I can, I'd love to grab that Rise, as not only does he have a durable and defensive item, but it will also fit our composition perfectly. Since we don't end up getting that, we just end up taking the Rel, since it does still have a shadow item that can help us, and Rel's a unit that we're currently running anyway. So for now, with the way we're sitting, I do think this is the strongest position to take because we don't even have the Rise, so we may end up keeping a lot of these units in our composition. Unfortunately, I think the crowd control from our enemies will be just too much here for Draven, but we'll have to see what he can do. He is a one-man army after all. Just kind of surprising how the chains from LeBlanc are still able to hit and deal damage even after she's died and wasn't coming back. But thankfully, we have a 2-star Mordekaiser in the front, so he's able to hold out long enough for us to come out with a win. From here, all we're really looking to do is find the pieces of the composition that we need, but also we are at such a decent health total that we can just look to collect Dravens. And thankfully the 2 Ironclad is buying us enough durability in these fights that we're able to come out on top fairly reliably. Just as I say that, unfortunately, we don't end up targeting Yasuo in time, and I believe we're actually going to end up with a loss here. At this point, I think we're fairly stuck with the comp that we have, as we haven't seen a single rise. We really haven't seen much of anything else that we're looking for. So I think we're just going to have to play the Ironclads here. And surprisingly and unfortunately, we still haven't been able to see another Draven yet. Perfect. The reason why I did the roll was because if we found the Draven, we would sell the spare Diana on our bench. Because a 3-star Draven was buffed and would deal an extreme amount of damage that he should be able to solo carry even from this difficult position. Now, I'm not personally sure if Taric is better in this situation than the Nautilus, considering we're still running ourselves with Ironclad. Although I have to think it's probably not better, all things considered, because the third Ironclad would give us so much extra armor. I still believe that if we ended up finding Viego, that he would still go in over Hecarim, and we would just throw the Shadow armor onto our Thresh, and we'd put the Hand of Justice on Viego, knowing that we'd get the 2 Assassin buff as well. But I do think that now that we're top 4, we're kind of happy with however this game turns out. Realistically speaking, we'd love to get a top 2, but we'll take whatever we can get at this point. There is a Draven on the carousel. Now, I doubt our opponents will let us get it, but if they do, that's going to be our 3-star Draven. Yeah, they don't get it solely to try to block us, which is fine, because what we'll do is we'll take the Ionic Darkspark, and we'll end up hitting the 3-star Draven anyway. What a game. So from here, we just watch the show, because I believe that Draven's damage should be high enough that we shouldn't have any trouble with these fights unless he's crowd controlled the entire time, like he has been. So even though our opponent decided to try to block us and stop us from getting our Draven, we still ended up in a top 2 position. Playing flexibly and working around the fact of getting certain units only helped us here, as we ended up potentially coming out with the first place in this game. We'll have to see exactly what happens here, because depending on Draven's targeting, Teemo could be the last one alive and we could lose the 1v1. So we'll have to see what happens. So the crowd control continues on the Draven, but he seems relatively undeterred as he just continues chucking out axes. And with that, and playing flexibly, we end up with a first place to end the night, thanks to Draven 3. And what a great game to end off the night. We're able to get a nice increase of 22 points off of where we started. We felt more confident about playing flexibly, and we saw the power of even a 2-star Draven against the best compositions the game has to offer. In Hellions, a Nightbringer Yasuo with, I believe they had 8 Nightbringers. Yep, 8 Nightbringers plus the extra Legionnaire. As well as an Abomination with Vel'Koz and Spellweavers. We were able to overcome all of those odds thanks to playing flexibly and selling the early Sett 2-star that we had in favor of going for Draven as our main carry. With that, I hope you were all able to learn something. I hope you all had a great time, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Take care, everybody.